So let's talk Draco now. Now, just kind of starting off the bat right here, and again, I'm going to say what I said there at the beginning of the rolls. Obviously, we predicted Draco coming. This was no, deep secret or anything like that. We pretty much all knew Draco was going to show up with the arcade collab. It was heavily hinted at by Nero's VA being in the lineup in the roster, and even Tiamat's third pin skill heavily hinted at the possibility of battling Draco or something like that. So we pretty much kind of had a good idea that she would be there, and doubly so if you actually paid attention to the arcade storyline. It kind of made sense. Doubly so if you knew, again, other stuff from Prototype. So looking at this, the one thing that we did get wrong, the one thing that I do have to disclaim and kind of apologize for is I assumed that she would not be a beast servant. In fact, I've been saying for years that you would probably not see a beast servant in FGO until the beast storylines kind of wrapped up. And sure enough, they ended up bringing her out as a beast. So I am wrong on that, and I did want to say so, just to disclose it. But again, I basically had been right with that statement all the way through the release of even Tiamat right here, right before. And to be fair, Tiamat was an alter ego on arcade as well. So it's only been with Umu here that we finally actually see our first beast servant. And the one thing I want to disclaim as well about that is that they did say on the live stream that the parameters for Draco here are not going to be the same parameters that every other beast would have. So I've seen a lot of people talking about her class effectiveness. She is 1.5 times effective against all of the 7 main classes. Actually, the only exception to that would, I believe, be that she is 2 times effective against a berserker. But, so again, there is that. And so a lot of people are assuming that that's just how beasts will be, but we have no indication of that being the case. In fact, there may be some indicators to disprove that other beasts will not have the same thing. And even if you look at the beasts that we fight in the story, they tend to have different parameters themselves. So I think we can take them at face value on that statement back there during the live stream. But okay, let's actually talk about Draco and her kit here. So again, just starting off right off the bat there, she's got 12.7k attack. That is very strong attack power. Definitely something I like to see. If you're going to be foeing her again, that's going to be up to like 13.7. So definitely not a bad amount of attack power there. Now, again, looking at the HP, it's only 13k, and that is probably going to be your concern here because one of the issues in Umu's kit is that she doesn't actually have any sort of hard survival skill. So that is going to be the concern, is as you're taking her in whatever capacity, you're going to need some way to protect her if you're going to try to go the distance. If you're not just going to be 3-turning something and just kind of just one-hit quitting everything, you're going to want some way of actually helping to keep her alive. But we'll talk about that as we go through. Now again, her attribute is not shocking in any way, shape, or form, Beast. That is different from the normal man, sky, and earth triangle. You have beast and star that kind of reside outside of that. So she is beast because she is the beast class, and that is going to confer her some interesting things. Looking at her star absorption here, she's relatively good. This is in the higher tiers of star absorption in terms of what we expect. So she's kind of on pace with being, like, relatively speaking, an archer or something like that. Again, star generation here at 10.2 is also fairly solid. Her NP charge attack rate here is only 0.57, and you might already be sneaking a peek down there at the deck and going, oh no, that's not very high. And you'd be right to say so, but we'll kind of talk about that a little bit more as we move through. Only a 3% NP charge defense, and then a 0.6 death rate. That is fairly low, so definitely really nice in that regard. She is chaotic evil, she's female, she has animal characteristics, she is a saber face, she is dragon, humanoid, immune to pigify, sovereign, Roman, servant, and in stages 1 to 2, a child servant. I did see some people getting confused about this today. So that kind of does imply that stage 3, which as of right now of me recording this, is Ascension locked, it does kind of imply that the third ascension will be not a child. So for those of you guys that know, you know, and I'm definitely going to be happy to see that form. But again, let's take a look at her deck now here. So obviously she's got the triple buster deck here, the gorilla deck, and you might be thinking, ooh, wow, you know, that surely lends itself to a buster unit. Surely she's a buster NP. She's not. She's actually a single target arts NP. So this is the Galatea deck all over again, and I have seen some people express concerns for the fact that she has triple buster, and I will talk about that as we go through. Definitely, this is really nice for being able to form triple buster brave chains. It's really good for damage output. It's really good even for the mighty chain. But the issue that you're going to have is that as a result, you don't have nearly as many cards to generate natural noble phantasm with. So that is going to be one of your issues looking at this, but at least looking at the hit counts, everything is either average or, in the case of the singular arts and quick card, above average at 4. So really, really nice there. Looking at her active skills here, we get the first skill, and this is kind of as predicted. She charges her own NP gauge every turn for 6 turns. And you guys can see this is Number of the Beast. For those of you guys that don't know, she is basically Beast 666. And as a result, she gets 6 turn NP gauge, and then basically gets increase own critical damage 6 times, and reduce own damage taken 6 times. The only gripe I have about this meme is that they cool down 7 turns. That's a missed opportunity. It should have been 6 as well. But I totally understand why they did this. Again, looking at it though, it's not a bad thing. She gets basically the 10% charge per turn, which is nice. And then again, up to 30% crit damage. And then a nice solid damage cut of 1,000. And it's going to last 6 times, so that's relatively beefy in that regard. Looking at her second skill here, she seals all enemies' skills for 1 turn, inflicts burn for 3 turns to them. Again, burn damage is basically 5,000 for 3 turns, so you're looking at roughly 15,000 damage there just off of that. And then she's going to have a 500% chance to increase their gauge, so basically the demerit on enemies, by 1. And then she's going to increase her own attack for 3 turns, 40%. I did see some people being like, wow, that's really strong. That's actually pretty in line with Nero Caster as well. And then if you start thinking about original OG Umu and even Nero Bride, they all have relatively powerful 40% attack ups. So again, really, really nice. That's actually not out of the ordinary for her. What is crazy here is she has a unique trait now. The ability to grant herself Grail status for 3 turns. So you might be asking, what is Grail status? Well, we'll talk about that. So as we get to the third skill here, she increases her own buff removal resistance by 100% 1 time 3 turns. Again, this is basically as expected. So she will prevent herself from being buff stripped for 1 time. And again, this one doesn't scale with the skill. It's 100% by default. Then, if she has the Grail status from the second skill, it's going to increase her own damage against Dragon and Roman enemies for 3 turns. Again, 40% each on each of those power mods. And then gain critical stars every turn for 3 turns. That is going to be up to 10 there at, again, rank 10 of the skill. And then grant herself debuff immunity for 1 time. And then ignore defense for 3 turns. On top of that, she's going to increase her own healing received for 3 turns by up to 20%. And then charge her own NP gauge every turn for 3 turns, 20%. So now you're thinking she has 30% charge per turn. That's nice. That is solid. So let that address some of your concerns over the NP gain rate there. But again, I think just what's really awesome about this is all of this is conferred by having the Grail status. So you're basically going to want to pop her second and third skill in tandem. The only issue is going to be the cooldown of the second skill is only 6, whereas the cooldown of the third skill is 7. So it's going to be hard to keep them in relative parity without delaying popping the second skill. So at that point, this may be a candidate that some people will actually just not lore in order to keep it at 7 to keep the timing the same. But again, that is part of her steroid right there. You're going to be losing out on 4% attack up there, so that's up to you if you want to make that choice, and I don't necessarily advocate for it. But still, it is a very strong kit for both carding, for again having that extra trait damage there, and we still haven't even gotten to the most insane parts about Umu. So let's start looking at her passives. She gets Authority of the Beast C. This is expected for an additional critical damage buff. And then Independent Manifestation E, which is another telltale trait of a lot of the Beast Servants out there, which further increases the critical damage by another 2%, gives her instant kill resistance of 2%, and mental debuff resistance of 2%. So again, the mental debuffs, as you guys can see here, are stuff like Charm, stuff like Skill Seal, stuff like Terror. That is not Stun, that is Terror. But definitely very interesting right there, right? And then on top of that, she gets Nega Messiah EX, which increases her own debuff success rate by 500%. The way to understand this is this basically means she ignores any and all debuff resistance that the enemy has. This just cuts right through that at 500%. So that's going to make it more likely that her debuffs land. So if you imagine someone like, say, like Urael or Sorthino that might have a like 20% magic resistance, or sorry, debuff resistance, it might just go right through that. It's not going to care about that 20% for the purposes of the calculation. So really strong, but don't get confused into thinking that this means that her debuffs always apply. This is basically just negating the debuff success rate there. Okay, looking at her append skills here, obviously something like extra attack finesse might be really nice on her, because again, we do have that concern over the NP gain rate. And again, you are going to be someone here where you're trying to loop her as an arts unit as a single target. So carding is going to come way more into a focus with a unit like this. Now, the question is, will that be stronger than the second append? Mana loading. I don't know. Having that 20% charge helps out. That's maybe one Castoria skill that you can defer to the next turn. So it really just depends on what you kind of want to do. I think having mana loading is probably still more valuable from the standpoint that that allows you to maybe defer that skill, or again, maybe try to card count and try to see where you need to use certain things. So I think I'd rather have the mana loading still even on the single target unit. Doubly so when you know they've got charge per turn, because you may be able to kind of work that where they need very little overflow charge from another unit in order to reach their Noble Phantasm naturally. And so maybe all you're having Umu do in this case is actually take out one of the waves. That could be a thing. But again, it just depends on how you're going to be using her, as either a sort of alternate DPS for a wave or as a devoted damage dealer in a sort of like boss killing environment. Again, her third skill here is anti-caster attack damage aptitude, and I did see some people talking about this. This is a third append where it's going to be against a class that she is already somewhat effective against. So this is a good append in that regard. And so definitely something that you might want to actually try for if you ever find yourself having the coins. Still, I'd still probably go after something like the mana loading, but that's up to you and your preference if you just value the damage. Okay, now let's talk Noble Phantasm here. She has an 8-hit single target Noble Phantasm. And you might be thinking, ooh, that's really good hit counts for an arts unit, and you would be largely right. The issue there, though, is that her NP gain is relatively low, so this is somewhat tempered still. Now, she's going to deal damage to one enemy. Nothing crazy right there with that. It's just straightforward. The crazy part is the overcharge effect. She deals extra damage to 7 Knight Servant enemies. This is a really, really bad way of saying she deals super effective damage, 150%, to the 7 original Fate classes. So again, your knight classes and your cavalry classes plus berserker. She deals super effective damage to all of them. On top of that, like I said before, she will have 1.5 times effectiveness against those knights and cavalry classes. So add in this and she's practically effective, full-blown effective against them. That is really solid. And I have seen people comparing her basically to a berserker to that degree. Now, does that make her that strong? Well, it just depends. But again, let's actually go look at the damage numbers and give you guys an idea of where she stands. Now keep in mind, this is our first beast class. So this is a brand new type of class. It definitely means that things are not necessarily going to be as they've always been. Taking a look at the NP damage list here though, remember there's a couple of things to keep in mind. One, this always assumes neutral. And as of right now, to my knowledge, there is no one that she is neutral against. Because basically she is, maybe Shielder, I haven't actually checked that one. But basically she is at least semi-effective against the Knight and Cavalry classes, 2 times effective against Berserkers, and she is weak to all the extra classes. So again, definitely something where, yeah, these numbers aren't necessarily going to be indicative. But it's still a good idea to give you a premise because everybody else in this list is calculated based off of neutral numbers, including Berserkers. So taking a look at this here, you guys can see just how many lines are necessary for basically Draco here. So the base value at NP1 is going to end up being roughly 40k here. And while that seems, you know, maybe, oh, wow, she's 5-star, it's not as much as I expected. Remember, take these numbers, for instance, and just multiply by 1.5 in most cases. Add in the fact that you can have Dragon or Roman, Dragon and Roman, which as far as I know, other than Umu, I'm not sure there's anyone else that qualifies as this right now. And then the 7 standard classes servant. So again, this is the, hey, I'm super effective against the base classes. So this is going to be the actual number that you will see in most scenarios, okay? 59k, almost 60k right there. And this is unbuffed from external sources. So this is only her own buffs. You don't have any sort of like Koyanskaya, Castoria, any sort of Tamamo or anything like that in here amplifying the damage. It is just Draco's own abilities. And then you have Dragon or Roman with the super effective mod against the base classes. And then again, the combination of Dragon and Roman, which again, like I said, really probably not going to be a thing. So I wouldn't worry too much about that other than the theoretical possibility somewhere down the line. But still, 83k is a very solid number, and that is just NP1. For instance, if you were to go higher up against those Knight and Cavalry classes, at NP5, you're looking at 100k damage there. That is still really good. And doubly so for a unit that's going to have as nice of a kit as Draco will have. So again, I think Draco is going to be really solid for you. The refund numbers are going to be a little bit troubling, but remember, as a single target, you're often going to have those cards to help you out. So don't worry too much about it. I think the real concern here is going to be the Buster deck, but there are things you can do to help this out. There are ways that you can basically make her less reliant on carding damage. And again, it's all just going to be about taking the appropriate supports. I highly recommend taking like something like double Castoria, and again, maybe something like a Oberon or something like that in order to help that happen. But still, she's definitely going to be solid. Now, one of the things that chat has wanted me to mention is there is potential for maybe the 3rd and 4th form of Draco to be different. And if that's the case, I will re-release a new video going over the kit in totality and addendum this, basically. So the possibility might be that I've seen some people mentioning that it could be that her 3rd and 4th form might have an AoE Noble Phantasm. If that's the case, I will react accordingly. But Again, as of right now, I'm judging her just based off of what we can see in the event. And I do think just based off that, she is quite strong. So it's definitely a really, really, really nice thing. New command code makes enemy hit Roman, so yep. So again, I really do think that Umu is going to be a quality unit, and she is your first and only beast unit in the game right now. So keep in mind, same thing happened with Pretender back in the day, where they kind of made the unit strong at certain points shortly after the release, before they kind of got around to releasing another Pretender. Expect that to probably be the case again. So I'm not saying that you're going to like regret not rolling for her, but I am saying they probably will find times to incentivize having the beast unit. Also, definitely make sure you check out her summoning animation. It is amazing. So again, that is my 2 cents on Umu.